Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Rock Your Shine After You've Been Cracked Wide Open. I am very excited about this episode that is specific to pet loss. And I have with me today Jason Dahl, who is an end-of-life hospice veterinarian. And he is an associate veterinarian at Lap of Love. And we will be getting deep into how he got into this work. I just want to do a brief intro of Jason. He went to Tufts University Veterinary School, and he is from central Pennsylvania, where he was a general practitioner and did emergency work, emergency medicine, and now does end of life. His background is in avian and zoo medicine, and he is going to talk about how he got into end of life work with pets. And so I want to just say welcome, Jason. Please tell our listeners how you ended up going from being a general practitioner and what drew you to end of life with pets.
Absolutely, Susan. Thank you so much for that introduction. Third time's the charm. We got it. So for me, it was all about the patient connection. In medicine, we talk about narrative medicine a lot. And so that's beyond blood work and beyond lab results and tests. That's all about that connection of why we're there. I am a graduate of the pandemic. I'm a 2020 grad. And so right when I was entering the field was a very scary time for everyone. We weren't letting families into the hospital except for euthanasias or for extenuating circumstances, and really limiting our interaction with them. I was either on the phone or outside their vehicle talking about some pretty serious medical care and future care for I would argue one of the most beloved parts of their family. That unconditional love, I think, is something that we've always known about pets. We've always known they've been family, but especially within the past few years, not only has pet ownership become almost like celebrities that live among us, deities, our shadows, our best friends, but also the proportion of senior pets. And senior is just a number for dogs. That's at 7, 8 years old, cats 8 to 9 years old, and then geriatric is when they're a senior, but are also living with a medical condition. So the proportion of senior and geriatric pets has increased exponentially, almost a third of the pets out there. I think the need for end-of-life care veterinarians, which I know is a big mouthful, is needed more than ever. And I think the expectations for the euthanasia process to be as peaceful, the veterinary community is talking a lot about. So I'm excited to share my experiences here with you.
Excellent. And I just want to say for listeners, I know that those of you watching YouTube, we are having some issues with freezing, so we're going to do our best. So we're just going to keep on rolling with it as long as we can hear you, Jason. So I started talking to you about right before we started to record about my 14-and-a-half-year-old golden retriever that I had to put down in December. And of course, I know, this is not a news story where people really try to hang on to their pets that they need to put down. They try to get through the holidays and do all of the things because it's so painful. And what I had mentioned was that this idea of what it looks like to grieve our pets, because I think oftentimes we don't do a very good job in giving the space that people really need to grieve their pets. I think that people are expected to move on very quickly. We'll see someone post on Facebook, I had to put my beloved animal down, and we all say our sorries and we all move on. I know that there is judgment. I have certainly been on teams before where somebody has had to take a week off after they put their pet down, and everybody sort of has judgment around that, especially people who are not pet lovers that may not have a pet. I'd love for you to talk about this idea of this disenfranchised grief that you were talking about before, because I think that this is so important. I think that we don't do a great job of leaving space for grieving human beings, and with pets, it's even more so. Can you talk to us a little bit about that from your perspective?
Absolutely. Like you said, disenfranchised grief, the grief that not everyone understands. And especially, I'm sure that from what I've heard on your podcast before, there is no right and wrong way to grieve for yourself, but there's certainly a right and wrong way to support others that are grieving. And sometimes this is someone's last memory of another loved one, or this is their first ever pet, their best friend, or this is sort of the glue that's keeping the whole family together. So the pets can be such an integral part to not only our happiness and our health, but also our overall families. Certainly for me, I really love when there's like 10, 12 people sort of crammed in the room, all for like a 5-pound kitty, or everyone kissing the dog's face and getting lots of paw prints for them, those little physical reminders that they're always with us. But the toughest families for me is when it's just one person and it's their last pet. A spouse may or may not have passed away, and this is sort of their last memory. And it's always harder to leave those homes. Whereas even when a extended family of 10, 12 are there, all sort of grieving together, you're like, they have each other. Like, that is, I think, so important. So I think when you see those posts or do that, even if you never met the pet, I'm sure that their human has told you about their pet too. So to really celebrate that relationship that they have together is really important. Something that I often talk to families about too is, how are you going to celebrate their next birthday? Since that is something that is much bigger. Like Susan said, I'm based in Maine now, so I've certainly helped a lot of families in the community. And I helped a family a few months ago that reconnected with me over the holidays when they were talking about their dog's sort of lavish birthday parties. They said the last one, like almost like 30 people came to, and I was like, well, how are you celebrating his next birthday? And they were like, we really haven't thought about that. And I said, I mean, it doesn't need to be big, but I think you two, like, I talked to the couple and was like, you two at least need to do something together. If you want to do something big, absolutely. But I think that's what he would want, is to have even another day that you're celebrating him, and to really continue that bond, even though, of course, it's so much different now, but that bond is never going away.
And I love that. I even read an article. I can't remember where. I don't know if it was the New York Times. I actually can't remember where I read the article, but it was a research study that they had done on people and their pets, and that you can love your pet equal to your child. And and I know
And
that
for a
that
lot of
is.
people without human
Oh, I was
children,
just
they
going to
are their
say,
children.
I don't have human children. So my pets have always been I mean, they are, and everybody knows me with my pets. Pets are part of the family, right? That's what they are. They're just part of the family. And I love what you're saying about birthday, because, as a grief and loss therapist, I also talk to people, what are you going to do on the 1-year anniversary? What are you going to do on the birthday? Like, what are you going to do to sort of celebrate this loved one that has lost? And I adore that you're saying this about our animals as well, because it is the same. And, oftentimes people will say, do you think pets, do you think we'll see our pets again? Do you think do you think that they are with us on the other side? And of course, 100% yes, they are. And
Absolutely. Rainbow Bridge, come on.
right, right.
That's that's a no-brainer. And I think it's so interesting, just since I've attended a few human hospice conferences, just since we can learn so much from each other. And I know a big thing in human hospice is like no flowery language, like don't say like they're gone, or like they're asleep or something, especially with children. But with animals, like, we have all this sort of vernacular around that. But one that I really do want to sort of like nip in the bud, that I really want people to sort of stop saying, is put down. Because we're not putting them down, we're honestly lifting them up.
Oh,
We're
it's going to make me
alleviating
cry.
we're alleviating the suffering that they're having, but also preventing any future suffering. Especially this time of year, I call them angels, just since I have to do this every day. So I don't say owners or clients, I say their family. So I help a lot of families with larger dogs this time of year, because especially we know the main winter is coming and there are a lot of dogs with mobility issues, and the families are really thinking for not only their angel's safety, but also their own safety. And I've certainly seen dogs that have been down for days, if not weeks, either due to arthritis or neurologic decline. And that's hard. And yes, you can get bed sores or infections from not moving, but something else is going to overcome that animal's body and having them pass. I know a lot of people have this sort of romanticized feeling of pets passing in their sleep, but the reality is that honestly is very rare. And when it does happen, it's not without stress, anxiety, and suffering. And so I implore people to really talk to your veterinarian and about sort of what options they have. Not every vet has the luxury to come into the home, but they can certainly tell you how they approach euthanasias and the space that they have. And a lot of veterinary clinics have beautiful couches and places to try to make it feel like a home, even though it's in a clinic. Or there might be some local options, Lap of Love, some other ones as well. And Lap of Love has helped make sort of a vet finder, so that if people are interested in those options, just since of course this happens during the evening or a weekend, sometimes when regular vets aren't open, and emergency clinics are very overwhelmed at this point, especially during the holidays and on the weekends. So I think to prepare as much as you can. And I think that will help alleviate a lot of the stress, not only for you, but for your loved ones, furry and otherwise.
I'm getting very emotional because you're bringing something up for me where I had to I put 3 dogs down, 2 Goldens and an Alaskan Malamute. And my Golden of 14 and a half years, I had to put him down a day before my birthday. It was December, and I wanted to get him through Christmas, and it was on December 28th of 2020. And my husband and I had lots of conversations about it because he felt like how do I say this? He felt it was time to put the dog. I was just going to say put the dog down. So thank you very much around that language. I think that
It's
is so
adjusting.
important.
It's
It's
adjusting.
adjusting, uplifting Indy up. And I think it's always our inclination to want to keep people alive longer. Like we prolong suffering. Because we don't do it to cause harm, but we do it because we just don't want to say goodbye to our loved one, our pet or our human. And with Indy, I think we did keep him alive for a little bit too long. And he told us when it was time, because that next day he simply didn't get up again, right? And what you're talking about with mobility issues, he had the arthritis and we had that body harness. And I weigh 100 pounds, and it was wintertime and on the ice, and I'm trying to lift him and I'm falling. And so everything that you're saying right now is really hitting me, because it was dangerous. It was dangerous for me. It was dangerous for Indy. He told me when it was time. The vet, we brought it was of course during COVID too, it was 2020, and we went to the vet, and they did it right within our car so that we could bring him home and have him buried. But I think
I
that
bet he loved the car, right? Loved car rides?
he loved car rides. And and I've also been, though it's also been very traumatic, where I was alone putting down one of my dogs. And I think that what you're talking about, that if they do have to lift their animal up, that's going to take some readjustment.
That's
to
okay.
to
You're
not
trying.
to not go alone, to not do it alone, because I do think that we need that, even if we know it's time and we're saying goodbye to our loved, our beautiful pet and their senior, to have somebody there. But I want to talk to you, Jason, about this lap of love, what it is, how
Yeah.
it came about, because I think it is this beautiful service that you go to people's houses so that pet
Mhm.
can die right within their home, just like hospice with human beings in their home. Can you talk to us about Lap of Love?
Absolutely, absolutely. So Lap of Love Veterinary Hospice started by 2 amazing veterinarians in Tampa, Florida, Dr. Danny McBetty and Dr. Mary Gardner. They were classmates at the University of Florida, and Dr. Danny started it after she was very early in her career, and she was working emergency. This mom was saying goodbye to her dog and was like, can they just stay on my lap? Like, I don't want to put them on a medical table. Can they just stay on my lap? And she was like, absolutely. And so from there, that's where lap of love comes from, is literally. And that's what I tell families all the time, because they're always like, oh, like, do they need to be any special place? And I'm like, yeah, their favorite bed. I've been on many master beds, under Christmas trees. Trampolines are very popular places as well. A few of the beaches here in Maine. So it's really wherever they're most comfortable. And I'm gonna little asterisks there. Obviously, meet your angel where they're at too. If they're having mobility issues, maybe don't take them somewhere if that's going to cause extra stress, or certainly if it's a cat or something that doesn't like to be out of its sort of comfort zone, don't push that. And some ailments too, some of the illnesses that they're living with, you don't necessarily want to bring them somewhere super new, even if they love the beach, but just meet them where they're at, which is what I always try to do with families as well, is to meet them where they're at. As a doctor, you always need to, again, that narrative medicine, like, this may not be textbook, but I'm not treating a textbook. I'm treating what you're providing with me, but then also to give you realistic expectations. And palliative care is all about comfort care. It's not about diagnosing, but sometimes I do have families that are like, ooh, we want to try this one more thing. And so working with your regular vet or your local specialists are really important. And that's a part of hospice too. It's a team sport. If you look in the literature for human medicine, it's not just your end of life care doctor, it's everyone coming together. And it's nice to have someone consistent that knows where your lines in the sand are and what your goals are as well.
So what do you mean by that when you say what your goals are? Because I've got so many questions in my head right now as you're talking, and I want you to define,
Yeah.
more deeply into what you mean by narrative medicine, and
Yes.
then also what you mean by what our goals are, because I think that what we all struggle with is, when is it time? This is what my husband and I had ongoing conversations with, because my husband felt like we were prolonging his life at the detriment to our animal. And then
Mhm.
I kept feeling like, well, he still has life in him. And I think that that is a heavy burden for people to carry, of when is it time to put their animal down. There we go again. Put your animal down, lift your animal up, and say
Yes.
goodbye to and let our animals transition. I think that that is a brutal decision, for
It's,
any of us to make.
it's the hardest decision I think any living thing ever makes, but it's the biggest gift that another living thing can give another. And I think to reframe that as well, and again, having a veterinarian, whether they're your regular veterinarian or seeking out an end-of-life care veterinarian, to talk about what are they living with. And sometimes I just list out all the things that either are diagnosed or that we're observing. And sometimes when we get to the fifth or sixth, either diagnosis or symptom we're seeing, the families are like, wow, they're living with a lot. And I'm like, yeah, they are. Let's talk about what that looks like, what things could be, but also like what can we control in the home and what your comfort is as well. Not everyone can give insulin twice a day. Not everyone has the luxury to get a harness or to see a cardiologist. Again, those are sort of the lines in the sand, and I don't think they're right or wrong. In medicine, we're always taught like what is the gold standard, but I, so much of that has to do with endless budgets, endless time, endless physical prowess. And I always think of the budget, or taking the TEMP of the family. I'm a veterinarian, so of course I had to make it a funny acronym for something very, very serious. So T is time. Not everyone can drop everything. You were saying sometimes people take a week off to grieve. How much time beforehand were they offering 24/7 care in the home, or going to vet appointments, or buying dog food, or getting all the medications that they need? That takes a lot of time. E is
And
emotional.
it's so expensive. I will just
Yes, it
say
is.
that.
Yes. Yes, that's the M. That's the monetary. So E is emotion, M is monetary, and then P is physical, like you were describing with Indy. If you have a large dog that has mobility issues, that's a safety issue for them and for you too. And I think a lot of people sometimes when they get houses, they think of, oh, mobility for me. And I used to practice in Pittsburgh, which is the city of stairs and very, very narrow, tall houses. And sometimes I have to go in there, and whenever I do a hospice appointment, that's the first thing I do is I want a tour of your house, but from Sparky's point of view, from Fluffy's point of view, to see what stairs they encounter, to see what textures of floors they encounter, where do they eat, where do they sleep, where do they enjoy time. And that, I think, it shows us so much. And you were mentioning where my background is in zoo and avian medicine. That's husbandry. There's a word for that, is what sort of environment are they in and how are they interacting with that, and how has that changed too?
Maybe I'm just naive and I haven't been out in the world enough at 57 years old, but I'm just so blown away. I honestly did not know. I mean, I knew that there were vets who would come to the home and work with you around end of life, like lifting your animal up,
Yes, yes.
but I
It's an
did not,
adjustment. And euthanize is not a bad word. It
and
literally has the
euthanize,
word good in it, but that can be a little medical for people.
but when you talk about hospice, you're talking about it's not just a one day thing. It's like human beings where you can be involved in hospice end of life, working with your vet toward euthanization. And I honestly, if I did know that, I don't remember knowing it, that you could be involved in sort of a real plan around this, because I really
Yeah,
felt
you're
like,
involved in every other aspect of their life. Why not
right,
this? And I think death is not a moment, it's
right.
a
It's
process.
a process.
Just like with birth, birth is certainly not a moment, it is a process. And so I think to prepare the best you can, of course, there are emergency euthanasias. There are certain conditions that come up very suddenly. But if you have a senior pet, there's a lot of resources out there for you. There's books, there's lots of different websites. A Lap of Love offers a lot of anticipatory grief support as well as post euthanasia support as well. I know there's countless Facebook groups for probably every diagnosis that a pet can get out there. Again, to always take those with a grain of salt and always consult your regular veterinarians, but know that you're not alone.
What's available for resources? Because you talk about, I mean, money around, and unless people have pet insurance, which is also
Yes.
expensive, it's expensive just to
Yeah.
euthanize your pet, and then everything else that you said. I mean, the amount of money that I spent on
Oh,
Indy for medications, all of arthritic medication, all of these things that
yeah.
I did for him to help keep him more comfortable at the end of his life, and then actually the euthanization itself. Are there resources out there for people that may not have the funding to do some of these things that people can do at end of life?
That's a really good question, and it's honestly really dependent on where you live. And there are some hospitals that have like emergency funding or things like that. So certainly let them know. Care credit. I have a lot of families that are on Lap of
What's
Love does off care
what's
credit.
that care credit?
It's a credit card that you have to apply for, but it's something that a lot of families find a lot of use for. And you can just go on their website, Care Credit, and it can offer a lot of support. Just since in veterinary medicine, since a lot of families don't have insurance, or even if you do have insurance, it's all reimbursed. It's not like human insurance where you get the bill much later and have to pay there. It's like you're doing your big copay first and then reimbursed afterwards. At least that's how a lot of pet insurances work.
That's good to know, because I do know that that can be a real limitation for families.
Exactly. And so I know that's not something you want to think about, especially when you
Hmm.
first get a pet, but at least for whenever I worked with, was in general practice, brick and mortar practice, and had that first puppy appointment, we talked about everything, sort of the whole life, which I know is really tough when you're first bringing in a puppy, but I was like, here's what we can offer. My hospital did offer payment plans on Lap of Love. offers payment plans as well, but it's really dependent on what your local resources are. And so definitely look into those. Again, it's not something we want to think about, but you would rather be prepared
Mm-hmm.
than find yourself in a situation where you're not. And Lap of Love, one of the many reasons I love working with them is they do offer an angel appointment, sort of a free appointment once a month for me, and which is kindly, very kind for them to do. And we have about 350 doctors
Wow.
nationwide, and so that is very generous of them and very nice for me as well, especially to support a family. But of course, that's up to the doctor's discretion as well. And so that's not something I super let people know. But I'll tell your listeners just in case. And I think that's another reason why Lap of Love is amazing. And of course, they're always looking for. And a lot of that is built from donations from families that we've helped before, that want
Oh,
to be like,
that's
this is an amazing service, and how can I help in that regard? So if you do have that, I know Giving Tuesday was yesterday, but certainly look locally too if there are any options like that as well. If you do have that luxury to support that, and there's so many ways to. Everyone says, "Oh, I'm an animal lover. I'm an animal lover." Here's a wonderful way if you have the resources
No, that
to.
is beautiful. And we'll have that. Make sure and make sure that that you send me those links. I want to make sure I have those links for people in the show notes if they would like to give, in that way so that other families can benefit.
Absolutely. Oh,
Go
one
ahead.
more thing,
Yeah.
for knowing local resources. If you have medications, harnesses, things like that, of course, keep the sentimental ones, with the toys, maybe a blanket or something like that. But you always think of your local rescue as well, especially if you have pain medication, insulin, things like that. Just since a lot of sometimes, depending on what pharmacy you got them from, sometimes you can return them. Normally you cannot, especially if the seal is broken, but I know any rescue would be very happy for those donations. And I always tell families, you're on your own timeline, but once an animal lover, always an animal lover. That trip to the rescue may be more beneficial than you think.
You may go home with an animal.
Exactly. I mean, I'm not saying immediately do that, but obviously make sure that the medications aren't past any expiration dates. But I think it is such a gift to at least see the dogs and the cats and be like, okay, maybe when I'm ready.
That's
Um,
actually, this is a really beautiful segue. I want to talk about this because I know that I have been in lots of conversations with different people and friends after you lose a pet. After I lost Indy, I
yeah,
immediately jumped online. My husband thought I was insane. And for 3 days straight, I didn't do anything but decide, because I had decided that I was going to go with a smaller dog. We had three Goldens. One was hit. We had to euthanize two. One was hit by a
mhm,
car that was super tragic. And then we had our Alaskan Malamute. So this time through, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm getting older. I'm going to go after a smaller dog. And you know how long I waited? Indy, we euthanized him on the 28th of December. And I found this miniature Aussie Doodle out in another state. And we got him 3 weeks later. Other people I know wait years to get another
yeah,
pet,
and
and it's completely a personal thing because
absolutely.
it's
Thank
like a
you for
human
saying that.
being, right? You can't replace a pet. You can never replace a human being or
Yeah,
a pet, right? And so, but for me, I was like, I must
yeah,
have a pet in my life, and other people feel that they need to wait. Completely up to the individual on when is the right
absolutely.
time. But I love what you just said, though, about being around the energy of pets, right? Because that's the other thing that we did. We went and just saw puppies, because
Yeah.
it brought me a sense of joy. So thank you for bringing that up. What I would like to venture into now is really talking about, because I was a little surprised to see a veterinarian at my talk on grief and loss, and it
Yeah.
made perfect sense. And so when we had put down my Alaskan Malamute, it was my husband's dog that he had had for many years when we met, and he was out of the country, And I think the dog's name was Cooper, and I think Cooper waited for Steve to leave because I don't think he could tolerate. Look, I'm gonna cry. I think it was intentional. I had to go and euthanize that Cooper on my own. It was devastating. To this day, it is still devastating. And the vet left me alone. He was there with me when he euthanized Cooper, and then he left me alone, and I did not know what to do, which, as I said earlier, bring someone with you. But I
Yeah.
love, like, where did you get your training in it? Because do veterinarians learn how to, like, it when you're in school? Is there anything around this idea of grief and loss and how you deal with human beings who have to euthanize their pets? Because I really feel that I don't know. I feel
So,
like
I mean,
it's so devastating.
yeah, I mean, I always say I became a veterinarian because I love people and the animals are just an added bonus. Some of my colleagues might say the reverse, but it's all about caretaking the the people that love the animals the most. And you see that in sort of every facet of veterinary medicine, not just in companion animal, but in livestock, in zoo medicine, in wildlife. There's always a person attached for the best well-being of those animals. And so much research and dedication goes into those caretakers. And we certainly don't get enough, I don't think. But every vet school has a slightly different approach because there's no one right or wrong way. We did a good amount of sort of like some vet schools bring in actors, some bring in just members of the community, and we talk about it and split into like small groups that are sort of peppered in throughout the 4 years. And we have the year of clinics similar to physicians or other healthcare workers. And I mean, you're not going to see everything. And I think it just happens to be the individuals that find their sort of niche. And I'm so happy to have found mine here. I'm obviously a talker, and I don't know, the way my mind works is like like a processor. Like it's not like sort of that quick fast acting that you would see in like surgery or emergency medicine. I did well by my patients and their families, but the way where I'm sort of happiest is to have this plan, adjust as needed, but then also just to hear the stories. I think if you've ever met anyone that has a pet, and I know the moment I tell people I'm a veterinarian, they're like, oh, let me show you my pet, or let me tell you about my pet. And it's just, I love that. And unfortunately, the way medicine is, sometimes doctors don't have that luxury. They try their best, but they're overwhelmed with not only the volume, but I think the expectations as well. And so something that I really want to advocate for my colleagues, especially going into the holiday season, prepare as best you can. If you're traveling with your pet, get those meds filled now. Do not wait until the week before Christmas. And be kind to them. They're experiencing the holidays just like you. And I think a statistics that a lot of people don't realize is that veterinarians have the highest rate of suicide of any medical profession.
No, I did not know that.
And so I think to be really kind to them
Why
and
is
give
that?
them,
I want to slow you down because
sure.
the question that was coming, I
Yeah.
was going to just ask you, it's really interesting that you're bringing this up because I was going to ask, how do veterinarians take care of themselves? Because that is a huge thing for us with therapists, right? I mean, I used to oversee a huge team. And what does self-care look like? Because typically, as you know, those of us in the healing profession are horrible at taking care of ourselves.
Yeah,
And
that
so,
work-life rhythm is tough. Balance is, I don't even say work-life balance, I say work-life rhythm because it's like
yes.
a symphony. It's how you have those pauses and the crescendos and decrescendos in your life, but it's very multifactorial for veterinarians. I mean, we have access to medications that can induce death, or in large animal or livestock medicine, sometimes like access to firearms. But honestly, the more overwhelming is how we're sort of treated sometimes by our families, by the families of our patients, not our regular families. because just the expectations, the long hours, the debt to income ratio, and sometimes in a lot of circles, like veterinarians are seen as like lesser doctors or not even doctors too. So that can be very wearing on their quality of life. And certainly there's a lot of toxicity that, and in the day to day, having the sometimes unrealistic expectations for pet care and the way that the veterinary profession is going, I'm very worried about a lot of my colleagues that are in sort of general practice, and I'm a end of life care vet, and I am honestly the most fulfilled and happy that I've ever been, which isn't to say that all vets should go into end of life care. It's what has worked for me, but I know for a lot of my colleagues, I want the families that they work with to really give them grace, know that they are here to help.
Mhm.
No veterinarian is in it for the money. We are the lowest paid of any medical profession, as well as have one of the highest debt to income ratios of any medical profession.
And
And we are
you're talking about because your school is just as expensive as any doctor, right? But you're not getting, but you,
exactly.
and we all
Exactly.
complain about how expensive. Now, this is interesting. Sorry guys, I have to just go into this for a moment because
Yeah.
those of us who are dealing with our pets and we go to the vet, it's so expensive, right? Because of the
Yeah.
insurance aspect. So we
Yeah.
think it's a racket, right? How many times have you heard that? Oh, veterinary medicine is such a racket because it's so expensive. And so I love that you're educating all
Yeah.
of us on this. I mean, it actually is. I can just feel the emotion in my own heart that we make these judgments and these assumptions and we actually have no idea. And so I want to go back to this because I feel like this is such an important point about veterinarians where you feel like when you were talking about the expectations of people, do you mean that they get angry? Are you talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean the cost is unfortunately again that sort of gold standard
Mm.
or platinum standard too. Again, we as doctors, or we anywhere in the medical community, or you as a therapist, you want to meet your patients where they're at. But the tough part is you need to balance the actual patient and then their family too, and what the expectations and what works for 95% of patients and families might not work for that 5%. So I think to really talk to the veterinarians and the veterinary technicians too, and I think that's the big thing too, is don't just give your veterinarians grace, but I mean, I think everyone in your life you should give grace
I
and
agree.
non-judgmental too, but especially your technicians, your veterinary technicians. They are superheroes. I talked about celebrities that walk among us, the pets, the superheroes that walk among us. Your veterinary technicians, especially your licensed veterinary technicians that have spent their entire careers to make themselves better, not to become doctors, but to be the best animal medical caretakers that they can be, that are revolutionizing the field. And then the receptionists too, they are the front lines. You do not want to make enemies of them, because they are your advocates as well. I mean, everyone wants to be your pet's advocate too, but I think to talk to them about what your expectations are, and I know that's so hard to do in a 15-30 minute appointment. So I
That's
think
the
to
other
be
thing I was going to say. You go to the vet and it's like this,
yes.
right? You feel like you're in and out and you don't have that
Yeah.
luxury of time. I feel that way with my doctor too, by the way. And I
Exactly.
think,
So I
yeah,
mean, to be prepared, and I mean, my fiance, he's a medical student right now, so I think the biggest thing is to just to be prepared for any appointment, especially a medical appointment for your pet. Like don't send the person that doesn't know their medication, or that, because that sometimes that happens. Sometimes there's a main caretaker, but due to their schedule they send someone else. So write things down or type things out, or better yet, be there for the appointment, and treat it as seriously as you would for your child, or for a parent going to the doctor. And I think that will make history taking and meeting where your pet is at, and then going on from there of how they can help, what your options are, what's out there to make them the most comfortable as well. But it does take some effort on your part. Being responsible for any life is a responsibility. And I think that that's a big thing to know as well, is pets give us so much unconditional love, but they are a choice. And so to take that up, because I know they don't take their responsibility lightly either. They do all they can to please us or to make our lives as interesting as possible. They're like, oh, I need to push this off the counter, or oh, like what's in that trash can? Like I think I need to sample that. So they really enrich our lives. And so I think the least we can do for them is to give them this basic security, which is good healthcare.
I love that. And so I just have one more comment I want to make before I go into my last two. Well, of course, you guys, I will talk about the card that I pulled today, but I just wanted to make one more comment about that, at this end of life and making a decision for our pet, because I know that I have felt like this. I've worked in acute rehab brain injury, and certainly with my mother's end of life, that I think we also prolong human life too long oftentimes, and we watch our loved ones so deeply suffer before it. But we have a lot of people helping us make those decisions, right? We've got our doctors around and our nurses around, and we don't feel like we're that person making that sole decision. And that's why I deeply appreciate this conversation. And I hope it's been helpful for our listeners to know that they do not have to make the decision to put their pet down alone. They can talk to their vet, they can make a plan. They can even plan it
Celebrate
out.
their
They
birthday
can
afterwards.
celebrate, right? They can do all of those same things that we do when we have to say goodbye to a human in our lives. It can be just as devastating. It can be just as hard. And even though it can feel downplayed in our world, that I want all of our listeners to know that, just like you hear me talk about when you lose a person, find the safe places to share the stories of your pet, because I certainly know for me that I still talk about my Indy, and I've got a dear friend who had a black lab, and she talks about Biscuit. Like, we talk about them just like,
Oh,
they're a part of our family. All
well, because
right.
they are.
Right.
They
Right.
100% are.
They
And I
100%
think,
are.
honestly, if someone tells you they're just a dog, they're just a cat, like really consider not having,
Right.
I'm not saying cut them out of your life, but at the same time, take the feelings that you have and educate. And then obviously if they keep doing it, then cut them out. But I think you want positive people in your life.
Yes.
But I think at the same time, a lot of it is they're just not exposed to it. And we all know people that aren't around animals just might not understand. But I think to educate them by saying they're a part of my family just as much as, and then name one of their loved ones too, because it's just as deep. But I think to really support each other, and something that I've noticed too is when I visit one home, I'm back in the same neighborhood maybe a few weeks or a month later, because neighbors talk, friends
Exactly.
talk, and I
Word of
think to
mouth.
support them. And
Mhm.
I've often had, when I go to another house, like, oh, I helped you a while ago. Like, how, like, thank you for supporting them just as much as I know that they supported you. And that's, I think, one of the beautiful things of Lap of Love as well, is that with every pet, there is a memorial page that a family has access to, and they can share it with their family members, write an obituary, light candles, and really start that healing process.
I love this conversation so much. It does astound me that it's taken me this long to have a conversation about pet loss. And I'm so grateful that you came to my talk and I got to meet you. And
Hey, it was meant to be. It was meant to be.
all right, so we'll have all of the links to Lap of Love, etc., in the show notes. But I want to finish up with, I just want to show you guys the card that I pulled today. It sort of speaks for itself, but I think it's the perfect card given what we are talking about in terms of lifting our animals up, because I pulled Happy Happy. Okay, happy, happy. Look at the card, right? Could it be any more
It's my
beautiful?
twin.
See, that's what I mean. And really what this card truly represents, I think just intuitively for this conversation is that what you said earlier about lifting our pets up, and that is what we are, that is also what we do with each other. It's what we do with people who are we are saying goodbye to, who transition to the, that's all it is, right? It's just a
Yeah,
transition out of
exactly.
physical form into spiritual form. And so I just have to read what this card means because you'll understand how beautiful this is. So the prosperity message for happy, happy is this is a time to take pride in your accomplishments. You're doing good work, providing exceptional service, and are well compensated for it. The world rains gratitude upon you, and you're happy with the results of your efforts and creativity. I feel like this is out to all of our veterinarians in the world.
Exactly.
Isn't it
The well
amazing?
compensated, I
Yeah,
guess.
I know.
Maybe not
Well,
monetary, but definitely.
heart wise.
Exactly. Exactly. We'll get there one day, hopefully.
Isn't it amazing to consider all that you have done? Remember your partnership with Spirit. In this
Oh,
moment, too, your soul has always known you could accomplish anything if it brought you joy. And I feel like this just
no,
speaks to our relationship with our animals and that they bring us
absolutely.
deep joy and we can continue to celebrate them on the other side. And so I'm deeply grateful. I've got two questions for you. Are you ready?
Absolutely. I'm ready for you.
And I think this is a really beautiful question, given some of the enlightenment that you've brought to us around the veterinary practice. So I'm going to ask you, Jason, what does self-love mean to you?
Giving with growth. We're living this life only once, but I think what we can give to others helps us grow.
Beautiful. I love that. And I used to ask people to finish the sentence, hope is,
Hmm.
and I have decided to change that to something that I think is even more powerful than hope, which is faith.
Hmm.
Faith is a deep knowing. Finish
Yeah.
this sentence. Faith
Okay.
is.
Faith is transformative. When you have faith, hope, whatever spiritual sides you have, and I know for many people there are many sides and there are no right or wrong ways, but I think to transform how you are working within situations is really important. So whether that's this is the saddest day of my life, I'm saying goodbye to my best friend, to transform that into this is a day of remembrance and I'm alleviating all their suffering despite all the hurt that I'm feeling. Or faith for me, transformative is my mom, who I lost to COVID. She's a was a physician, and she transformed the way I see grief because this remembrance, meet me at the Rainbow Bridge with her and one of our cats that's with her now, is what brought me to Lap of Love.
Jason, I want to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your light, your love with me, with our listeners, and with our pets. I just am very grateful for this conversation today. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome, Susan. Thank you for inviting me, both unintentionally for the first talk and now intentionally again, the transformation. And I'm wishing everyone a very happy holiday season, that you're able to be with family that you can hold and hug, and those that you can hold and hug with your hearts too.
Thank you. And I want to thank all of my listeners. I know that you guys will take whatever you need from this conversation on your own journey, and sending you all love and thank you for tuning in. Bye for now.